We had some excellent questions during the break, which would answer things that are going to come up not only for you people, but all the people who will hear the CDs. And also the CDs are ready. The first half of them are ready. You can get them out here. So they're here for you. And you can also order them online. We have a website. Does everyone know about our website? drsterlingellsworth.com. Okay, John, is it John?
Right.
Your question? Say it loud.
Okay, my question was, how did my style get to be a pleaser when both my parents tend to be more domineering?
Yeah. So the answer to this question is models can come from outside your family. And this is why we say, don't sit a little kid 1 and 2 and 3 in front of a TV, because they're going to get the filth of the nation for models. And now we have research that indicates kids too can be made ADD or even brain damaged because TV is so fast moving, it overwires their head, especially at 2. We find that some ladies are having little kids 2 and 3 in front of a TV because it's such a great babysitter. And this is speeding up their brain and making them so they cannot pay attention to normal, slow-moving, boring, everyday life. I was working with a boy that came home off a mission because he says that was the most boring thing I ever did. And I said, Sean, well, what are you used to? He was a football captain. He was a basketball captain. He's used to action all day long. And when life is boring, turn on the TV. So you can speed your kids up so bad that they can't even do a normal thing in life because it's boring. They're used to constant excitement. So modeling can come from TV things. It can come from friends across the street. It can come from visiting in-laws, outlaws, grandparents. It doesn't have to come from your parents. But the big thing for you to do, John, is finishing sentences to yourself quietly as fast as you can go. I'm a pleaser because. See if you can do 10 of them. And you may find the answer to where it got started. Okay.
Then my other question is, how is it, I'm the youngest of 5, and none of my other siblings have any significant emotional problems. I wonder how they all got skipped.
Yeah. And you do? I think you're more honest than them. Later on today and tomorrow night especially, we're going to talk about positive psychology and the models of mental health. And we have some research here I'm going to go over with you showing that healthy people who are flourishing rather than languishing because their lives are empty, there's only 20% of them in the world. So even across cultures. So don't worry, there's so much going on. And this is the same theory that make parents say, well, I'm not going to put my kids in public school because they're going to get a lot of sick models and they're going to bring home strange germs. Yeah. And so they homeschool them, and all the kids do is get sicker and sicker from the mom and dad because that's all they have. And the stuff in the family. And so the answer is love supplies. Fix your own head, and then your kids will have a chance of getting love supplies from you. Okay, now you had a question.
What if your parents get divorced and it brings in other people? How do you tell what child?
Step families.
Yeah.
And blended families. I used to have an old tape called Blended Families, and it said in the beginning that this is the hardest thing 2 humans can do. If you want the highest and most difficult class in the Earth School, raise some blended families. Because not only does it get so complex that you can't even figure it out, but in each case, the person who is coming for therapy, when they finish the sentences, I'm this way because, then you'll start to see who they copied, who they couldn't copy, who were they included in, where was this person, and you can figure it out that way, even in a horrible step family where 4 new brothers and sisters moved in, it blasts the thing to smithereens, right? So, anyone have a question?
I'm a stepmother, and I get along with my stepson's parents, and that's probably unusual. But
Healthy people don't have nearly as much trouble with blended families as sick people.
I consider him my own son. son, even though he's,
Great.
you know, and he's a good young man.
It can happen. And you're a good old mom. Okay, now I had 3 questions here, and they came up and they showed some good principles. She had a question about sexualizing man, and then sexualizing women, and sexualizing other things, animals, on and on and on. And all of them have payoffs. When a homosexual person, a male, finishes sentences, sex with women, let's see, sex with men is much better than sex with women. You're going to hear a lot of things because the man is not going to get pregnant, because he doesn't expect you to marry him, because it's more fun, because males don't take and women do. And you'll hear some brand new things that makes this go. And then finishing the sentences. I don't like sex with women because they gobble you up, they need you, they take you, they possess, they boss you around. You never can make them happy. Men are much easier to make happy. And this is the great pull of pornography. There's no risk. You're going to succeed every time, right? And so then I'm terrified of risk because I think women gobble you up because. So then you go back further. My mom gobbled me up. She wanted me to do this, this, and this. And so finishing sentences is a magic technique if people can honestly answer it and take the answers and make them into new stems and then go back even further, which is described in chapter 7, drill down finishing sentences. Now, we've talked about this a lot on other CDs. What was some of your other question?
The closeness of siblings.
Oh, yes. Why she was close to one sibling and not the other, and it violated the rule, of course. And if you have something like that, the answering of sentences with that girl and with you that you're close to is much more powerful than the rule. The rule is just what you often see. And there's a violation of every rule, right? Anything else? Okay. Now, let's take the list of hang-ups that were in the tapes from before, and we'll talk about some common hang-ups that we often see in counseling. Let's talk about shy. How many have ever been shy? Yes. And so if you go back and say, I was shy because, so many people run into humiliation phobia. And the reason I don't say anything is because I will get humiliated or ridiculed or shamed or laughed at or put down. And these are the phobias: rejection, phobia, humiliation, ridicule, put down, shame.
And I found that the only humiliation or rejection that really is significant is our own.
Bingo.
And the only approval that's significant is our own.
That's right, but it starts out with others. Because when you're a little kid, you know, and these great big giants are around, older siblings and dad and mom, they're your major source of, primary source of love. And when they laugh at you or put you down or shame you or tell you to shut up or you talk too much, and the other siblings laugh at you, you've got the beginning of humiliation phobia. And the survival skill, that's a great word, a survival skill. All negative self-styles are survival skills. Now, what does it mean? It's a way a little kid survived in a dysfunctional family. Kids need love like fish needs water, like a car needs gas. And if they don't get it, they're going to survive by a mutation. And that's what these hang-ups are. So shy will usually be, all the hang-ups have underneath the dependencies, the people dependencies. We've talked in here about getting love supplies from God and sharing it with people. Well, most of these hang-ups will be monkey brain, where the people are dependent on the approval of other humans. They seek the praises of men, and that's why these things work the way they do. Let's talk about jealousy. You often hear this one. In order to be jealous, you have to be insecure. And the greatest fear of jealousy is someone else is better than I am. So if you have a negative self-concept, you feel inadequate as a female or a male or a human, it's easy to be jealous of someone else because you're so sure that that person has more than you have, and they'll take away your loved one because they're prettier than I am, smarter, richer, sexier, blah, blah, blah. And so jealousy, if you go down and you finish the sentences, will come to a negative self-concept, feeling of inadequacy, and the inferior is the key word. I'm inferior to this other lady, and she'll get my husband away from me, or my boyfriend, or my girlfriend. So when you see a jealous person and they finish sentences, it's going to go down to negative, inferior. And so what do jealous people do when they fear that someone else will get away, their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their fiance, their spouse, or even their child? I know a lady once, her kids were stopping off on the way home from school and having cookies and milk at this certain lady's house. And this lady was just trying to be a fun love source for these kids, but all her kids were going over there instead of coming home. So what did she do? Calls up this lady, calls her out. She was jealous because her kids liked this other lady better than her. It wasn't her cookies either. It was her empathy and her eye contact. She didn't have any kids of her own. And she would, is that right? Well, that must have made you really happy. Mm-hmm. And what happened when the kids came home? No, you can't have anything to eat. Wait till your dad gets home. We're going to have dinner. Well, Mom, I want to tell you about, there were some clowns that they came to our school and well, I'm busy. I have to fix the dinner in. So she's afraid that lady's more of a mom, more of a listener than her, and so she's jealous. And so what does she do?
You want it back?
She commands the children not to stop at phase ever again. And very often jealous people, when they get really scared, they'll get very controlling and possessive. So this possessiveness shows insecurity. Remember, we said all drug addicts have to control their source, the source of their drug. And so all people that are starved for love, they have to control the source of their love. And so they start to possess a wife or a husband or a child who's going elsewhere for love supplies. Rather than them learning how to do it better, they're going to cut off. And pretty soon, the kids are sneaking to phase. Anyway, it's really something, all these things and how they work. Okay, now, covet. What does covet mean? I've got to have that. I'll die for it. And so this covet is going to get down to when we talk about addictions here in a minute. And what is an addiction? Or what is an object that you covet? It's something you need for a love substitute, and you've got to have it, and you're dependent on it. So we often hear people who are so selfish and so driven and so obsessed about getting this thing, a promotion, money, a car, a house, a new husband, a new wife, different kids. It's horrible, yeah. So let's talk about ones you hear a lot about, impatience. Anyone ever dealt with impatience? There's an old saying that said, impatience comes from doubt, and patience comes from certainty. Can you see how that would be? If a person is impatient, they usually want something right now. You all know the saying, give me patience, dear God, and give it to me now. And so impatient is based on fear and doubt. And what's the fear and the doubt? I won't get it. I won't get what I want. I won't be successful. I won't get an A. And so they're very impatient because if they can get it now, that does away with the fear of failure. Fear of failure is so huge. Impatience. So we say that impatience comes from doubt and patience comes from certainty. And what's certainty? Certainty is a nice word for faith and hope and confidence and trust. So people who would like something but they don't need it desperately because they're secure within themselves, they are patient and long-suffering, the scriptures say. And they are sure, they're faithful, and they're confident that it's going to work out. Besides, it's not a big deal anyway because I'm happy without it. I prefer it, but I don't desperately need it. So watch for impatience and patience. Lots of people, when they finish sentences, they say, or procrastination. Let's talk about that. And let's talk about the word lazy. I'm lazy. I procrastinate. Anyone ever had trouble with procrastination? Yeah. And so as you finish sentences, I procrastinate because it's going to end up being one of two things. Rebellion against the authority, the shoulds, the supposed tos, the duty. So there's rebellion against some authority that's making you do things. Well, I should. Well, by all rights, I'm supposed to. Well, all moms are supposed to. All wives or all husbands are supposed to. And there's some rebellion. And remember, rebellion can be passive and it can be active. And often our rebellion is so passive we can't even recognize that it's real resistance against doing what you should or supposed to as you think or someone has told you or the society teaches you. And then the other one is fear of failure. So when you think about, I procrastinate, I don't do this, or I'm lazy because it will be, if I do it, I know I'll fail. And so I never want to finish anything because if someone says, well, is this finished now? And you're afraid of failure, what will you say? No, it's not finished. Because if it's finished and they find fault with it, that's your whole fear. And this whole idea is based on a great big lie that performance equals worth. Performance equals worth. One of the officers of our church said, your worth was established into pre-existence. It does not fluctuate like the stock market. So to earn worth by a certain performance or an appearance. For females, appearance equals worth. For males, performance equals worth. So often in our sick society where gender and different stereotypes rule, and they shouldn't, and we're going to show you that here in a minute. So if a person has a perfectionistic parent, or they themselves are perfectionistic, they will give themselves perfectionistic expectations. And if you jump through these hoops, perfectionistic expectations, you can earn some worth. And that is what makes people so they're terrified of failure, because failure means rejection. You don't get any love if you fail. And so they're going to be lazy or procrastinate because they're rebelling against this kind of control and the conditional love of it, or they're terrified of failure so they won't finish. And people call them lazy. But people who are called lazy in one area are not lazy in other areas. Why? Because they love it. No one's forcing them to, and usually they're good at it. So watch out for this word lazy or procrastinate, and think about rebellion and fear of failure. Peggy.
When you talk about perfectionistic expectation, are you talking about like a person that expects other people to be perfect? He may not be perfect himself,
That's
but
good.
he expects that of others.
That's exactly right. Perfectionistic expectations can be put on yourself, and they can be put on others, and usually they go together. A perfectionistic parent, it's going to expect you to get straight A's. I often tell about, we had an F rule in our home when the kids were being raised. If they got a sign from the teacher, letter or note, that they were getting an F, they were immediately grounded until they got it up to a D. And lots of parents say, well, we don't have an F rule. We have a C rule. Yeah, you're going to have some Lulu kids too. Because what healthy person would be interested in that many subjects? Straight A's? I mean, I went to interview at the Martin Aircraft Corporation in Denver when I was about 20 29 or 30 and just got my doctor's degree. And this psychologist showed me what I would do. And first thing he did is to take the mail and look through all the applications for executive positions. And so I went through the pile with him, and all the people that had straight A's, he put them in the shrink pile. I said, John, why are you putting all these people with straight A's in the psychologist's interview pile? He says, those people cause us more trouble. They file more grievances, they have more trouble, they're perfectionistic idiots, and they hurt the whole company. We waste so much money on people with straight A's. I says, well, what do you suggest? And he said, sprinkle in a few B's. So sprinkle in a few B's. Nobody in his right mind. So anyway, perfectionistic expectations about your performance or your appearance can make people so they'll rebel, fear of failure, procrastinate, and be quote-unquote lazy. Gene.
Where does cleanliness come in? I can't remember.
Yeah, cleanliness and orderliness, people can do that. I mean, what kind of performances do parents often require of their children to buy their love? Cleanliness, right? Orderliness, straight A's, athletics, right? Music, church. Think of what was big in your family when you were growing up. And if you performed, you could make your daddy or your mommy very happy. Right?
Sterling, can you pass fear of failure? Like, if, say, my mom or dad had fear of failure, can you pass that on to your children?
Yes, you can pass all your phobias on to children. I've had people with spider phobias, and they cannot think of one time they had any trouble with spiders. But they can think of the mom who had trouble with spiders and jump up on the stool, crying, get him, get him, get him. And the spider was so little, the kid couldn't even see it.
Yeah.
And he's going to learn that phobia from the mom. And they can learn all sorts of things. So think about cleanliness, orderliness, grades, athletics, music. Being popular is a big one. I know a girl was terrified to tell her mom she didn't get on the rally squad. She wasn't a cheerleader. And her mom had just really counted on that. Why? Makes her look good. And this is the part about the 4 things you should never do with a child's body. Neglect, reject, abuse, and use. Remember those 4? And she was using the daughter's beauty and her performance to get on the Sally Rally squads, so that would equal her worth. The same with grades. And so you do not want to take from your child's body. You don't want to criticize your child's body. You don't want to hurt your child's body. And you don't want to use it, or neglect it. Because children's bodies need to be loved, stroked, tussle their hair, held, wanted. How many of you know when you run into a person, if they are happy to see you and they want you? Yeah, and think about that, and be sure you show that in your eyes when you greet your children, especially if you're coming home from work, right? So, let it be unconditional. Now remember the terms conditional love and unconditional love, how we talked about there's no such thing as unconditional love because it's conditional on being in your real self. So remember that one? So most things are conditional, but this is blatantly where your external performance and your appearance means something about the parent. And the parents are performing to buy worth. And who are they using? The children. And the parents can even use a spouse to equal their worth. So this is a big one that we often hear about, performance equal worth. Our society is drenched with that. And the real truth is that if you honor the identity of a child and you love them just for the way they are, they're going to perform so much better than if you need them to do it so you won't feel a failure as a parent. And remember when I said before, the child who has to please his parents soon learns that she cannot feel her own feelings. She feels mommy's feelings as if they were her own. So she doesn't know her real self. And as she grows older, he may turn into a rebel. Now, instead of feeling mommy's feelings as if they are her own, she now feels the opposite of mommy's feelings as if they were her own. So rebels and pleasers never know their true feelings from their inside self. They've never been allowed because the parents force them to feel their feelings and be their little puppets. And so that is, once there was a little booklet called The Little Girl Who Never Was. And it was about a pleaser. She never knew what she really wanted in life. She was too busy pleasing her mommy or her daddy. So think about that identity rape when people are so afraid of not performing. And the people that are lazy, quote unquote, or procrastinating, there's a sure sign that something like that happened when they were little. John.
Doug Ellsworth, there are some payoffs, though, that lie gives people that you can't get otherwise. Is that right?
Like what?
Well, certain fancies.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. The payoffs is earning love. And the idea is that your worth is being loved when it isn't your worth at all. It's a robot idiot performance. It's not you at all, and it goes around you, and you get sicker and sicker and sicker because the love target is not you. It's your body if it's appearance. It's your performance if that's what you're doing. So the love target should be your real self, which a little kid will never get if the parents are using perform for me or look pretty for me. Get it? So it's identity rape to have that.
Oh, one payoff that you can get only with that lie is to dominate other people. Like I was just reading about Frederick Douglass, when he learned to read, his master understood that if he learned to read, he could no longer be dominated. And
Because by reading, what happened? He could figure stuff like this out. And he could get new models. That's why reading is such a great thing. And that's why countries that hold people in slavery will not allow them to read. Like one of the worst things you could do in the old days when there were slaves is teach a slave to read. You could go to jail for that. Anyway, so yeah, reading can free a person, especially if they have access to literature. Okay, now there's another one that's closely related to this, and that is the workaholic. See, if performance equals worth, then workaholic equals worth. And remember, in the workaholic, how many people have ever been workaholic or been raised around workaholics? There's two kinds of workaholics. There's the quality of your work, and then there's the quantity of the work. Get it? So the quality of the work, this is a person that sits down and starts to type up a paper. This is in the olden days, for computers. And they'll start to type a paper or start to write a paper, and they'll just go a little ways, maybe one paragraph, and they'll wrinkle it up and throw it in the trash can because it's not perfect enough. So that person is the quality of their work equals their worth. This one is the quantity. They'll have pages and pages in their paper. It won't say much, but it turns them on because it's so long. And then there's people who talk all the time. They never say anything, but it gives them an illusion of attention. How many know some motor mouth people who steal all the talking turns? And what do you know about those people? They're annoying, but how did they get this way? Remember the book, how we got this way?
I think I noticed myself always getting ahead when I'm around those kind of people, and I realize it's because I identify with their not-enoughness and they try to compensate.
Yeah, that's good. They identify with their not enoughness, which is inadequacy, and they're compensating by talking all the time. Now, there are some other things, too. No one ever heard them or listened to them. Or they had 12 stepbrother and sister, and they couldn't get a word in edgewise. It's the same way as people who eat real fast. And you go back and find out, well, if I didn't eat fast, there wouldn't be any food for me. If I didn't talk fast, there wouldn't be any listening for me, right? So lots of people do that, and they don't really have quantity rather than quality, yes.
What if you have a teenager that comes home and tells you about their whole day, but yet you listen to them all the time.
Uh-huh. What would you guys say about that?
Keep listening.
Keep listening, especially if you can. And some days,
Give him a journal.
yeah, give him a journal. Say, right now I can't listen anymore. My listener is broken. Could you please write this down and I can read it later when my listener is fixed? But there's all sorts of things. But how many of you have ever learned to mix empathy in with another love supply? So you would say, it's really important to you that I listen to all this. Maybe it's, I wonder if no one ever listens to you. So you could mix in. It's called forcing the insight. And you can do it with empathy. Yeah, it made you so mad because you really need them to like you. See what I did right there? It really hurt because your monkey needed them to like you. Well, wait, I don't know if that's right. So sometimes you might say, it must be awfully important for you to report the whole day to me. Don't you like it, Mom? I love it, honey. But I have some other things to do. So, and if you want them to finish some sentences, I like to tell you my whole day because. And suppose she says, no one else will listen. And if they'll make fun of me and say, oh, shut up, you know. The other day, one of the grandkids was going on and on with me. And the mother said, honey, maybe you could just tell a few of the most important things that happened on your field trip, because Grandpa has to go do this and do that. Oh, okay. Well, stuff like that. But look for causes. Will the dad listen to him? Will the older brothers and sisters listen? Does he have any friends that will listen to him? One person said, honey, I want you to talk to my tape recorder. And then that tape recorder is really listening. It won't miss a thing. And then I'll listen to it later. So, and there was a guy that invented a counseling machine back in the 1970s, and it was a booth you went into. This is the University of Illinois. And a student would go into this booth and start talking. And every few, I think it was 27 seconds or something, a very wonderful, soothing voice would say, mm-hmm. And kids would go in there like monkeys and sit and talk by the hour. And it was called a counseling machine. And it reduced the number of students who came to the counseling center. And what was their favorite love supply? Empathy. And then it had a sign on it that said, if you want answers to any of your concerns, make an appointment with a counselor. Mm-hmm. So you might rig up a tape. Oh, boy. It's funny, but it's not funny because people need listening and they never get it. You know, that's why empathy is the #1 love supply, because it's so rare. You know, out of 100 people, 66 people will ask for empathy as their favorite love supply. And 98% of the people will choose it if you give them a choice of 2 love supplies. Showing that when in doubt, do empathy. You're going to win every time. But don't worry about sticking in a few insights. Okay, lazy impatience, workaholic, closed up. Now, let's talk about closed up. We talked early in the lectures about task-oriented people and feeling-oriented people. Do any of you remember that? And we told the story about the little girl who slid out on her bike and cut her knee. She came running into Mommy. And if Mommy was task-oriented, she would say, why did you go so fast? Now look at that cut. We have to go to the hospital. 8 stitches. Oh, it costs us $800. Why don't you slow down? Wait till your dad comes home. Look at your Christmas bike. That's task-oriented. And feeling-oriented would say, it hurts like anything. Go ahead and cry, honey. You'll feel better. Right? And we talked about Mary and Martha in the Old New Testament. How Mary was more of a feeling-oriented person. Martha was more of task-oriented. Now, where do you think what's closed up mean? They won't talk about their feelings. So where do you think a person learns to close up? When their feelings are smashed, raped, made fun of, humiliated when they're little, right? Closed up people are repressed. Very rarely do they have any dreams. Of course, they have dreams, but they're not aware of it because they suppressed or repressed those. Closed up people have a hard time saying, I'm sorry. They have a hard time saying, I am wrong. They have a hard time being polite or courteous or saying please or thank you because it's dangerous, right? So now in the research on healthy people, which we're going to cover tomorrow, it says that a healthy person is selectively open. Open means feeling oriented, and they'll share their feelings. So if a person is selectively open, then they must also be selectively closed, which means they select the people to open up to, the safe people, and they stay away from the unsafe people. And thus the saying by Jesus, do not cast your pearls before swine. In other words, be selectively closed. Go ye not among them. Open only to safe, loving people who know the sacredness of human feeling. They don't want robots. They want feeling people who can share their feeling. And so you'll sense those. Someone was doing a research once, and he saw that dogs and cats would jump in their lap, and dogs would come up and be afraid. And dogs would slink away from these mean or closed up or scared people, and they would approach. And he was going to use that in his research in selecting open people and closed people with dogs. You know, there was an old movie called Shane. Remember that? Yeah. Alan Ladd. Remember when he came into the bar and you saw all the dogs going out of two different doors? They knew there's going to be trouble, right? So I remember that as a little boy, watching all the dogs leave. And I also understand that before an earthquake, animals know, and they go. So you see, sensitivity to what's going on is very important. There's a wonderful talk by Brother Bednar about discernment of spirits. And it goes right down to psychological sensitivity. And knowing your own negative from your positive, and then Peggy's from her, and all. The more you know yours, and you can discern negative from positive, evil from good, sick from well, the more you can do this kind of stuff. So closed up and open.